Good morning. To Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. Bradley's mother, Narky Skolin, passed away 3 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will have to face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will be then taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 and voice your concerns to please keep Bradley here in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a return guest on. I have Joan Kloth-Zanard on. She was last on the podcast February 6, 2023, Season 4, Episode 31, where we discussed the collusion in the courtroom and the importance of an ADA advocate. Now, today, we are going to talk about custodial interference that uses coercive control and alienating behaviors via domestic violence by proxy. So I welcome you back onto the show, Joan. And, why does this have to happen? Why?
It boils down to greed. It really does, unfortunately. I truly believe that a lot of this would not happen if we did not have the adversarial court system that we have.
Right.
But let's get to this topic of custodial interference. Custodial interference is actually a federal and state felony. It is a criminal act. That said, it also, every state, I should say, has a different penalty for this felony. So I advise, if you would like to look this up, realize that you've got the federal felony, but each state has their own felony on custodial interference. I think they analogous this more to kidnapping, but where the child is there and physically there, but there's no access to the child, hence custodial interference. And why do I call it custodial interference using coercive control, parental alienating behaviors, and domestic violence by proxy? Well, now we need to go back and look at this a little bit. When a parent or an agency or a person, could be a relative, deliberately impedes the relationship between the children and the other parent, this requires a particular set of behavior patterns, such as using excessive psychological or what we call coercive control, a way using behavior patterns that terrorize or create a fear or falsely lull the person in a cult-like manner to believe that this other person, this other parent is no good. This brings in what we call parental alienating behaviors, or what's called PAB, P-A-B. Parental alienating behaviors are a form of coercive control, but more specific to behaviors that directly impede the relationship with the other parent. Parental alienating behaviors create a cult of anger, fear, hatred, and rage at another person. Much like any cult, it warps the person's mind into this false belief about something. And all of this boils down to a form of domestic violence, but that we call domestic violence by proxy, because the offending parent or person or agency is not physically touching you.
Mhm.
They're not directly necessarily going after you and gaslighting you. They are projecting it through the children, another person, an agency, the courts, making it by proxy.
Mhm.
And with the adversarial process, this is just growing exponentially out of control.
I agree. I agree.
It is really time to take the family courts and strip them back down, taking out the attorneys, taking out all the professionals for right now, and you started a base, okay? Maybe it's the courts have to start with mediation using family relations and nothing but professionals who have extensive training and at minimum a BS in psychology and child psychology. And I think we've discussed this before on your show.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I don't want to go too depth into that. But what we're finding is that many of these professionals have no comprehension or understanding of
Mhm.
how this custodial interference and all the behaviors that cause this are traumatizing, not just to the children, but to the parent.
Mhm. Mhm.
And without that training and a BS minimum in psychology or child psychology, there is no way for these professionals, many of whom are attorneys, who have been trained in a very adversarial process, can understand it. Quite recently, had a conversation with an attorney who doesn't believe any parent should ever come into court pro se or with a limited scope attorney. And I said, and for me, this response would be, okay, so you're telling me anybody who can't afford an attorney shouldn't fight for their kids? This will be another conversation for another day. But this kind of attitude is part of the problem.
Mhm.
In addition to that, this same attorney claimed that the pro se's are gumming up the works in the courts because they don't understand the process. Well, of course they don't.
Mhm.
But then the government or the courts should be providing either a limited scope attorney or an attorney who sits with the parent to assist them.
That's
That
helpful. Yeah.
would that take down some of this adversarial, some of these claims about pro se's? Probably. But if we could avoid court altogether, the children would be much more healthy. If we could mandate that every divorcing parent had to be in individual therapy with somebody who specializes in divorce, custody issues,
Mhm.
the children probably wouldn't need counseling.
Right.
The children pulled out of the equation, and this custodial interference might not be happening at the depth and level it is happening. When we
Right.
get rid of go ahead.
Well, they made us take a parenting class, for family court, but it really, uh, did not address anything as far as third party interference and, what to do with the kids. It was a very inept class that was just useless at taxpayers' expense, okay?
Decades ago, I tried to speak with the people that provide the parenting classes here in Connecticut. I said to them, you need to do more training on on the problem of interfering with custody. They didn't want to hear a thing. Since then, Ginger Gentile has come out with a wonderful documentary called Erasing Families, which is from the voice of the children.
Mhm.
I think this video should be mandatory in
Yes.
every court-ordered parenting class or parenting program that the courts order. This film is so poignant. It could literally stop a parent in their tracks from alienating. And
Mhm.
if it doesn't, then we know that there's a serious mental health issue with this parent, or maybe there really is true abuse going on.
Mhm.
But even if there was abuse going on, as we know, if this was an intact family, they'd be in therapy. There would be therapeutic protocols in place. Why are we not just treating divorced families the way we treat an intact family? Just because you get divorced doesn't mean the parenting roles and parenting skills all change and you're no longer a parent. It doesn't mean that the kids all of a sudden are angry and hate you.
Mhm.
If there was actual true divorce going on in an intact family, the parents should be court ordered into individual therapy. Those therapists should be talking to each other, then having a co-parenting meeting with both therapists and the parent. So both parents feel like they have somebody there helping them. We might not need all this other crap. The problem is your adversarial attorneys come in and they start hammering at each other, accusing each other of things, creating more riffraff and more issues.
And gumming up the system.
They're the ones gumming up the system, not the pro se's. The pro se's are there because in their heart and soul, they know they're a good parent. They may not be a perfect parent, but they know they're a good parent. And they're willing to learn and grow. They're willing to take, I have some clients who will take endless amounts of parenting and courses just to make sure they're doing the right thing by their kids. Now, that was another one that this attorney said to me. Best interest of the child. He said, in this, as we discussed before we got on the show, really got to us. He said that, I asked him, so what about these parents who have never been adjudicated as an unfit parent and they lose custody? His answer, well, they must have done something wrong. Now, we all know that's not true. Then he said it could be based on the best interest of the child. Where's the definition of the best interest of the child that says that one parent is better than the other just because the parents don't get along? You know what? That's why we have parallel parenting. That is why we're getting divorced in the first place, because we don't get along. Just because we don't get along doesn't mean that each parent is not a good parent. Believe it or not, even though somebody is an abuser, maybe they only abused their ex-wife. Maybe they never touched the kids. And that's because of the dynamic between the two of them. Okay, was it wrong? Of course it's wrong. Nobody should abuse the other parent or the other person. But it doesn't make them a bad parent. They might have other skills, such as they may be phenomenal at sports, and that's their parenting skill. That's their main parenting skill. So they may not be real good with an intimate relationship, but they are great at teaching their kids how to play soccer or coaching soccer or whatever. That doesn't make, just because there's an issue between the parents doesn't make that person a bad parent. No, I'm not telling you that somebody who has slammed somebody and broken their ribs or given them black eyes is a good, safe person necessarily. But we also don't know what caused it. We also don't know, was somebody cheating? Did somebody steal all the money? Did somebody, or is this person just have anger issues that have never been managed? And this brings us to the next part of custodial interference. Many people that do custodial interference have major family of origin issues that have never been dealt with. And this is why therapy should be mandated, and the parents must go back into their family of origin and must discuss what it was like with truth.
Mm-hmm.
They must self-introspect. And if a parent refuses to do that, well, then that's a huge red flag that there's an underlying mental health condition that needs to be addressed first, so that they can then do the work they need to do. Because when they do that work for themselves, their whole life will become so much healthier.
Then you have parents that say, well, I can't co-parent with my abuser.
Well, you don't have to co-parent with them. Or this is called parallel parenting.
Mm-hmm.
What goes on in your home is none of the other parents' business. What goes on in the other parent's home is none of your business, unless your child is coming back with black and blues from abuse. Mm-hmm. I am tired of these parents filing false allegations of abuse when talking about gumming up the works. There are way more false allegations of abuse than there are true allegations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we have no way to, the courts and the government and policymakers or whatever, we really need to sit down and figure out, how are we going to penalize somebody who is deliberately filing false allegations of abuse or neglect against another parent, or filing false allegations of parental alienation, because this also happens. Mm-hmm. We're never going to be able to say that somebody wouldn't use that falsely, because it does happen. Right? I've had clients come to me claiming that they're alienated, and when I start to discuss it with them, I realize they're the alienator, and I tell them, no, you can't do that. That is inappropriate. That's alienating behavior. You can't do that. That's alienating behavior and harmful to your children. You can't. And if they aren't getting it, and there isn't like a light bulb moment, I tell them, well, I'm sorry. I really am unable to help you further. I think you need to find a professional. Mm-hmm. Because while I have the skills, that is not what I'm here for. I do consulting. Mm-hmm. As an expert. I look at the things that are going on around. I mathematically, if you will, I start putting A, B, and C together and figuring out, well, if all this is happening over here, and this is what's happening after it's been done, well, there seems to be a pattern here. Mm-hmm. So back to this custodial interference and the false allegations. Mm-hmm. We need to figure out how to manage that. What the domestic violence agencies say is that if we penalize somebody for filing a false allegation, well, then people aren't going to file because they're going to be afraid that they're going to get penalized. Okay, I understand that. Mm-hmm. But if we don't stop all the false allegations from occurring, mm-hmm. it's damaging our society. It's damaging our world. Mm-hmm. Because if we really have that many domestic violence cases, we have a very sad situation in this world. There is an excessive amount of violence that is unnecessary. Now, I don't want to tell people you can't watch TV and you can't watch violent programs anymore so that the violence stops. No, that's not how we're going to manage it. We have to get trained and educated properly on how to recognize true allegations from false allegations. Now, some of this is getting better, but they're lacking in the psychological abuse or coercive control and parental alienating behaviors. They need to learn this. Now, I so happen to have a product I developed called Red Flag Behaviors. It's over 200 coercive control, alienating behaviors that are used to impede a relationship. It's broken down into 11 categories. I don't have a problem, and it automatically tallies a number. The way it's set up right now is set up for parents. But I could actually change this and alter it so that a professional could use it to determine if there is a preponderance of behaviors that are creating a pattern that might indicate coercive control, parental alienation, and domestic violence by proxy. Mm-hmm. This is what we need, are things that the professionals can use to rule certain things out and rule certain things in. When we, this is one of the most horrid stories, and I think I've told you this before, and stop me if I have, the story of the father who's falsely accused of sexually abusing his 2 toddler kids. And it's done using photographs that the mother has taken of the children when they've come back from his house. Mm-hmm. He is arrested and he's sitting in jail for about a year. And during this time, the mother finally admits to her friend that she did this falsely. That what she did is every time the children came home from their father's house, she rubbed their private parts till they were red and raw, and then she photographed it and claimed that this is how they came home. This is sociopathic, psychopathic behavior. And unfortunately, this trauma to these kids, she sexually abused them. Mm-hmm. The father was released. The mother was charged with sexual abuse, but they really didn't do anything. Hello.
Yeah.
This mother needed to be in extensive therapy. You don't, to have the mindset that this mother had to create a false scenario and gaslight and set another person up is devious, deviant, and antisocial. There is an underlying issue with this mother. Again, these people need to be in therapy, working on their family of origin issues, because I can almost guarantee you with a 99% accuracy, based on 35 years of work, that the person doing the aggressive alienating came from a family where they were abused, whether physically, sexually, or psychologically, or had been raped, mm-hmm. maybe when they were a young adult. Mm-hmm. But they all had that trauma, and they're projecting their issues through the children, through the agencies, onto the other parent in an attempt to save little them that never got saved. Mm-hmm. This is so poignant because they've never dealt with their own trauma. And so the only way they know how to deal with their trauma, they think, is they project it because they think they're going to save them. It doesn't work that way, but they don't understand that because unfortunately, this is the only role model they had growing up. Mm-hmm. And in their world, that role model has to be right. And I explain it this way. If your whole life you're taught to walk backwards, mm-hmm. and then you get out in the real world and everybody else is walking forward, well, everybody else has to be wrong because otherwise your life has been a lie. And that is absolutely traumatizing to somebody with these personality disorders. It is imperative that they get the help to understand what happened in their childhood and how it is affecting them in their adulthood so that they can have a more healthy, functional adulthood and life. It might even open that door for them that they move into a new plane of life, a dimension of their life where they feel happy, mm-hmm. where they can feel more free to be themselves and not worry about what and who everyone else thinks they are or aren't.
Exactly. But then these type of people, I've always heard, well, you're the one with the problem. The problems are all in your house. It's you. I don't have a problem.
Right.
And so, and,
And you're right. So here's my answer to that one. There is no such thing as a perfect family.
mhm,
If there was, we wouldn't have all these self-help books. We'd have one book, The Perfect Family. It's the same thing as Perfect Parent. It doesn't exist that way. There is no such thing as perfection and being all right and one person being all wrong.
mhm,
We're human. We make mistakes. That's how we learn. Life is about the experiences we have. An experience is good if we learn from it and bad if we don't, because that is the point of the life experience. It's how we grow and learn. School is an experience.
mhm.
Having a relationship is an experience. Growing up in one's family, if it's dysfunctional, is that person's life experience. What did we learn from it? As a child, this is very hard because we look up to those role models. And if it's the only role model we ever see, how do we know there's a different way to be?
Mhm.
How do we know? We don't know that there's a healthier way to think, to
Right.
feel, to emote, if we've never seen it.
Mhm. But these people, they will not go to counseling. They will
Oh,
not at all. You know, you're the like I had said to you, you're the one with the problem. So I went to counseling to deal with someone who needs to go to counseling.
I do the same thing. Okay. So my answer is, look, we know that they're narcissistic if they're refusing to go to counseling. I'm going to explain why they can't go to counseling in
Uh-huh.
their mind. Okay. This is not an excuse, it's an explanation. Most aggressive, alienating personalities, coercive, controlling personalities, have been raised to believe they have to be perfect. Because if they're not perfect, then they're
Mhm.
not lovable. If they're not lovable, they're going to be abandoned. If they're abandoned, they're alone. And this terrifies them. This is part of the abuse cycle in their family of origin, that they have to be perfect. So, in order to go to therapy, they would have to admit they're not perfect.
Mhm.
And the only other reason they go to therapy is to prove that they are perfect and that they're not the problem. It's all the other parent. So when going in, a therapist needs to know how to take a person like this and redirect them, how to help. And maybe it's not therapy that we're putting them in. Maybe it's a parenting plan course. Maybe it's a co-parenting course. Maybe it's, but we don't call it therapy. Maybe it's called something else,
Mhm.
because if a person in that who's had this personality disorder, an inability to shift gears
Mhm.
and to be open to learning and to growing and to changing, then maybe we have to put it out there in a different way, that it's about learning, learning and studying the history of family dynamics. Maybe we put it in a different format that helps them to feel okay with opening up to a therapist, that it's okay to have dysfunction in your family. It doesn't mean you're not a good person.
Mhm.
It just means that there's been a glip or a blip,
Mhm.
kind of like maintaining your car.
Right.
It's just like changing the oil or replacing the tires. Sometimes we have to do, doesn't mean the car's not any good. It just means you have to keep up with things.
Mhm. Right, and people have got to just, and when the courts order, or sometimes it's the attorneys that order co-parent counseling. I don't know how they get away with doing that, but they set it up.
I
Um,
don't mind co-parenting counseling because
mhm,
it can be done virtually. So the two people never have to be in the same room. And with co-parenting counseling, they both have their own counselor, and those counselors can be in the room with them, so that you have two therapists with two clients sitting in the same room or virtually together discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And work and really they're actually doing is therapeutic mediation. That's what I think we should call it. Therapeutic mediation. And I'm going to write that down myself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great idea.
Because that is better than mediation, which is all legal,
mm-hmm.
or therapy that's all about behavior patterns.
Mm-hmm.
We're teaching you about how to mediate in a healthy manner,
Mm-hmm.
how to which is co-parenting.
Mm-hmm.
When you co-parent, you mediate.
Because
So if they
go ahead. Oh no, I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay, so if they can't mediate, then we need therapists to step in and do therapeutic mediation to assist them in moving past the pieces that are stumbling blocks for them, the things that are holding them back, the anger, the hatred, the rage, etc. Now, don't get me wrong. Alienated parents have a ton of anger, fear, hatred, and rage. Rightfully so. They're not seeing their kids, or if they're seeing them, they're rude and nasty. They're being slammed in and out of court. There's legal abuse syndrome, narcissistic abuse syndrome. They've lost their friends because the other person's badmouthed them. Mm-hmm. They feel alone. They are rightfully traumatized. And this is where the courts and the attorneys and many other professionals do not get the response mechanism and triggers to targeted parents who have had their custody interrupted and interfered with. The only way they could ever understand this is to have it happen to them or get the proper training.
Right.
Help this proper training. We are headed for a global disaster because the narcissistic personalities, the false allegations and false abuse claims, that adversarial process is growing exponentially. And if you think, and this is going to feed World War III. Mm-hmm. Because if we can't get along as a family, we can't get along and fix things in the family courts. How are we going to prevent World War III? Well, you're dealing with similar mentality almost here. I have an article I wrote, oh my God, decades ago called The Terrorist in the Home. And it's about the person who's terrorizing the other parent and the kids. It's no different than having a terrorist attacking our country.
Yeah, that's
the terrorists and their disciples have family of origin issues and mental health issues, obviously. That because even if somebody else harmed you or you believe they harmed you, vigilante is not the answer.
Well, I also think with these false allegations that sometimes people call in like 20 of them or even 30 of them at taxpayers' expense. I think I'm wondering when there's going to be laws passed that instead of talking about them, having someone actually do something about them and get these people under control that keep calling in and wasting time.
Exactly. Decades ago, I was speaking with the head of family relations at the time. And I think it was family relations at any rate. And we were discussing the false allegations because it had happened in my husband's case. And his response was, yeah, he said that 90% of the calls they're getting are false, unsubstantiated, and that it is really making it difficult for them. It's wasting all their time, money, and resources that needs to go to true abuse victims.
Right.
And it really hasn't changed much. I mean, we've got a few places here and there where maybe they recognize it quicker, that it's a false allegation, because we've been pushing more education on it and trying to get more people educated, but it's still a major problem. You know,
because what happens is, like, I had 2 back-to-back accusations within 4 days of each other, that actually the second one was actually filed months prior. We didn't know it. And the thing is, these courts then withhold the kids from you even longer to drag out the case. And that's, keep the well-oiled machinery running perfectly.
yes, unfortunately, breeds custodial interference, because now it's not the parent doing it. It's DCF, Child Protective Services, and the courts that are doing the custodial interference. But I would say, actually, they're complicit in the filing of the false allegation by doing this. They could easily, if they had the proper training, recognize immediately whether this was a false allegation. I tell my clients this all the time. Do not claim abuse unless you have solid, verifiable evidence or witnesses to it, because it makes you look bad, and it's going to get thrown out. You need to have physical evidence or a physical witness to it.
Well,
otherwise, and I understand that a lot of the time this happens in the private of their home. But if they've gotten punched in the face, get yourself into a bathroom. When you get out of that house, figure out how to go somewhere and get it. You can get a picture of it. Now, that being said, I've also heard of people who will actually deliberately punch themselves in the eye or bang themselves so that they can claim abuse, or have somebody bang their arm really hard so they can have a bruise on it. I'm sorry, no. That's sociopathic. That's psychopathic. When you have that much anger, hatred, and rage in you, that you would falsify evidence to harm another person, that means you have a serious psychological issue. Manufacturing evidence harms everybody. Making a child claim abuse that didn't happen is abuse. That child knows that the abuse didn't happen, but they also know that if they do not go along with the demands of that parent to state that they were abused, they will also be treated like that other parent. In some cases, the parent takes a simple act of changing a baby's diaper to claim that, don't you know your father was sexually abusing you, or your mother was sexually abusing you every time they changed your diaper? Well, how's a kid at that age going to know the difference? They wouldn't know. And even when they got older, they wouldn't recollect it, because who recollects their parent changing their diaper, unless, of course, they did something really crazy. That so it doesn't, you can't do frivolous. You can't claim and do this to a child, because now the child, you've just altered their memories. You've altered their personality.
Mm-hmm.
You've altered their psychological makeup. It's like taking somebody and cutting off their pinky and thinking that you didn't alter their body.
Mm-hmm.
You did. You cut off a piece of them. You can't do that.
And they're changing their personalities, as you said. You're creating more personality disorders by these false allegations, false narratives of what really happened, and then dragging them through family court just to get even with the other parent.
Yeah, I mean, and here's something that we've noticed also. The more money, the longer the case seems to get dragged out.
Mm-hmm.
And this is called price fixing. And that's because what the attorneys do is they figure out how much money they want to make before they're going to have the parents settle. And I think I mentioned this back in February. It's we've actually had an attorney or several attorneys here take early retirement rather than lose their license permanently for price fixing. It's a dirty business. But we see this all the time. I've also heard tales of where a client's attorney said to them, hey, for $25,000, we can buy the GAL. My client happened to say, no, this is inappropriate. We need to let the system do its job.
Mm-hmm.
And then he saw the guardian ad litem being handed an envelope of money. Mm-hmm. So the other side paid for it, paid for the guardian ad litem. And that is an ethics violation, as obviously. But beyond the ethics, it shows that guardian ad litem, who in the state of Connecticut is primarily attorneys, is a sociopath, psychopath. Mm-hmm. that he can get bought off at the expense of the best interest of the children. Now that brings me back to that attorney who also said to me, and tell me if we've already spoken on this today, that the judge is removing the children from the parent for some reason, and basing it on the best interest of the child. And we discussed that best interest, or what's the definition? Well, how does this judge decide that a parent who's passed every psych eval, who's never been adjudicated as unfit, is not in the best interest of the children? How is it not in the best interest of the children for them to not have both parents in their lives? Mm-hmm. This judge has now just played into the custodial interference. He is now, or she is now, a willing participant. What's the word I wanted to use? They're co-conspirator.
Oh, yes.
Co-conspirator. Mm-hmm. If every single parent who had PTSD, stress and anxiety, and we're talking rape victims, veterans from the war, people who are in traumatic car accidents, people who have lost a loved one in a horrific way, people who have lost their jobs, if every person with PTSD, stress and anxiety lost their kids, no kids would have any parents. This is not how this works. This works by getting appropriate, proper therapy and treatment, appropriate, proper training and education out to our professionals. That's how you're going to fix this. Mm-hmm. You're not going to fix it by taking and separating kids from their parents.
Right.
Just because they don't get along. Well, duh, that's why they're getting divorced.
Yeah, right.
Why should one parent have more clout than the other just because they've been gaslit and traumatized by the other parent? Mm-hmm. That's been the game plan. And the professionals have now played right into that alienating, coercive controlling, parental alienating, domestic violence by proxy, aggressive parent. They've just played it into their.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all
and they've now become a co-conspirator.
Yes.
They've now become a co-conspirator with this abuser to permanently remove one parent from the children's lives for no reason other than revenge.
Right.
And because that person cannot parent and co-parent. So you've decided the one with more money and more connections to get the kid? No.
But that's what they're doing every
And
day.
it's inappropriate because 90% of them are pro se's that are losing their kids. I got one case out of Massachusetts where it has now been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the father has been impeding everything and he is the problem. The facts and the evidence just are insurmountable against the father at this point. And I testified in this case, and the judge, they tried to block me as an expert, and the judge said, nope, absolutely an expert. So he wanted to hear what I had to say. The child is 16. The judge was supposed to have brought down a verdict or a decision within, I think it's 90 days or 120 days. It is now well over that. And the judge has done nothing. My client's attorney is so frustrated and done with the case, he won't even go back to court with her because he's tired of the rigmarole from the other attorney and the ex-husband. And the mother doesn't want to, should have written to the judge, motioning the judge on what the status of the case, but she's afraid to do it. She won't put herself on pro se because she's so afraid of being steamrolled. And here she sits, and the judge may never make a decision, and the kid's going to age out of the system. And in the meantime, this child has serious issues. She's psychologically splitting. She has hallucinations, and the father, and we don't know where those hallucinations ever stopped. The mother still has joint custody, but the father will not include her. He's blocked her at the doctor's. We've proven that to the judge. He's blocked her at the school. We've proven that to the judge. The amount of issues, it's incredible.
Then if she's not pro se, she must have an attorney still.
The attorney is done. He doesn't want to do anything more. And she doesn't have that kind of money. Her ex has a ton of money. She just doesn't have that kind of money to afford a full-time attorney. So she writes up all the motions. He submits the paperwork and goes to court for her.
Why doesn't she do a motion to compel
Well, they've done all this. Right now, what's on the board is a motion for sole custody of the kid. I think the father's asking for sole custody. Now, if the judge intended to give the father sole custody, the judge has had 3 opportunities to do this. The first time the father asked, and the judge didn't give it to him. The second time he asked, he then filed an ex parte trying to get it, claiming the mother was not complying with to approve the pediatrician. Well, mother couldn't approve the pediatrician because the pediatrician had been blocked from communicating with her. So she couldn't find anything out about the pediatrician. And then she found out that the father had already taken the child, not once, but now twice to this pediatrician without her being involved and telling her.
Oh, yeah.
So,
typical.
Right. So you have verifiable, solid evidence here that it's not the mother, it's the father. He has now 3 times asked for sole custody, and each time the judge has denied it. In fact, I would say that the judge was testing them on the very last court order. The judge ordered that the judge ordered said, father is denied sole custody. Okay. Mother is to sign off on the driver's ed Mother had refused to sign off because she was concerned, as she had
Mhm.
no updated health on the child's hallucination issues, and the last therapist that saw her no longer works at this facility, and said that the child was free not to come back to therapy, but the child then admitted she still had hallucinations. So we don't know, but because there was no medical evidence that we could provide, she has to sign off on the driver's ed. And in which case it puts it on the judge and the father if this child has an hallucination while driving and harms somebody.
Mhm.
It's out of your hands. You did what you can do. She didn't understand that when he denied the father sole custody, that was a big win for her. That was a bigger win than having to sign the driver's ed almost.
Right.
The third piece was that the father was to provide the mother with all the information on the pediatrician. Mother was to do due diligence and contact the pediatrician and talk to them, and barring any issues with this pediatrician that were legal, she had to sign off on the pediatrician. Well, father gives her info, but has contacted the pediatrician and told them that they're not allowed to talk to her. So when she calls up to get information, the pediatrician says, you have to talk to the father. And she says, no, I don't. So who blocked who? And that was when he filed the third complaint, claiming that the mother was not complying with the court's orders on the pediatrician. So mother had to respond and finally filed her own paperwork saying, I complied. This happened with the pediatrician. I do not feel that this is appropriate for this child to be going there, because they're not willing to talk to me and work with me. Well, now that the pediatrician knows the truth, technically she could have the child go there, but I agree with her.
Mm-hmm.
There's a conflict here, and that's concerning. At any rate, the judge denied him sole custody again on this issue, but hasn't decided the original case yet that triggered these court orders and caused the subsequent additional motions that the father filed to try and get sole custody. My thought here is that the judge doesn't have any intention of officially giving him sole custody.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the judge intending? We don't know. Why hasn't the judge responded? We don't know.
Is his docket too full and he can't handle all his cases?
Oh, no, I don't think so. This is a very old. She's been fighting in court for something like 16 years with this.
No.
Oh, yeah. His family cornered her and the child at one point, standing with 5 huge guys blocking her from leaving the apartment to get away from the father who had done something inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Terrorized the child, terrorized her. But she's a teeny little petite thing. She's got health issues. Teeny little petite thing. At any rate, but she's not the only case like this that I have. I have a couple others like this where it's this kind of a game. We provided all the necessary evidence. This just happened to be the most recent case that I could think of to show an example of where the system is failing this child.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you also, I could talk all day and I won't keep you too much longer.
We could talk all day.
But I mean, you've got judges that are given evidence that a parent has even had a PI produce, like solid evidence, and then they're still giving the child to the abuser. And it's happening every day. And I don't know why. And
here's the thing. Do I agree? I agree. The people that oppose the reunification programs and the theory of parental alienation, they believe that these kids are being given to the abusers. Well, guess what? That's the same thing we're saying when you give it to a parent who's alienating the kids. You're giving it to the abuser.
Mm-hmm.
So we all agree that the courts are not getting this.
Right.
They're not recognizing true allegations from false allegations, whether it be psychological, physical, or sexual.
Mm-hmm.
if we could come together on the same page, we would find out, take away the adjectives of gender, race, religion, creed, state, country, take that all away. And we boil down to one thing. Domestic violence is not okay. And we need better training and education to recognize true allegations of abuse from false, including psychological.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When we can do that, we have a better prepared set of professionals,
Mm-hmm.
whether in private practice or through government agencies, who can now recognize what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is true abuse, it doesn't mean we pull that parent. We need to understand the underlying issues here,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe that person could be a really good parent, but they've never been able to get through their own childhood and learn a new way to behave or to socialize and have intimate relationships. They're stuck on the Ferris wheel, literally.
Yeah.
Forget the gerbil wheel.
Yeah.
They're stuck on the Ferris wheel.
Uh-huh.
Going all around and around and around because they can't get off of that little loop to learn, oh, well, wait a minute, maybe if I could get over to that ride over there. Maybe that's a different feel.
Mm-hmm. That's what's going on. Very sad.
It is very, very sad because I believe there is a better way to do all of this, even for domestic violence. There is a better way. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because the baby just crapped in the bathwater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We clean the baby up. We clean the bathtub up, and we start over again.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have some severely socio-psychopathic serial killers out there? Of course we do. Would I want them as a parent? Of course not. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about severe sociopathic murderers. We're talking people who had a damaged psyche, but not damaged so far that they would take a human life.
Mm-hmm.
So there might just be a way for us to reach through.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they never will be perfect. And maybe they will still have bouts of anger. But maybe they will start to learn another way, and slowly, with practice, they get better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
almost want to say, I'm doing this with one of my clients who's an autistic young lady who's just turned 23. She has horrible social cues. She can't read them. Okay. So I told her to take a drama class. Mm-hmm. So she can learn not only how to recognize social cues, but how to respond by practicing. Mm-hmm. Maybe this is what we need for abusers. They need the ability to take a drama class, to learn how to control their anger, to learn how to recognize when their anger is getting triggered or when somebody's triggering. Maybe I don't know. I'm throwing out ideas because anything could work. We just have to take the time to research, study, and figure out what's another way. Why is there so much anger and rage in this world? Why are we getting so many abuse complaints? Is it all real? Or is it really a massive amount of false allegations? And so we're not dealing with the abuser, a physical abuser. We're dealing with a psychological abuser. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
false allegations are abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So we need a way to heal, deal, and mediate out.
Mm-hmm. Instead of running into a courtroom where it's all going to get gummed up along with your money.
Yep. And I'm sorry, family attorneys. This is where you come in as in the regular civil court for all the finances. If we have a case that is so exponential that even the experts feel that the children are becoming too involved into the middle of their parents' divorce.
Mhm.
Okay, maybe then but then I would suggest it be only attorneys who have a secondary degree in psychology and child psychology,
Mhm.
because otherwise they cannot present an appropriate case at a proper level to deal with what's going on.
Mhm.
Jail is not the goddamn answer.
Right. Right.
Removing a parent is not the right answer, because eventually the kid is going to look for that parent. Even children of abuse who were pulled from their parents at very young ages, at any age, the one thing that Linda Gottlieb said in her 25 years worth of work with over 3,000 foster kids was that the children always asked when they could go home to the abuser or see their abuser.
Mhm.
They wonder, when can I see my mom? When can I go home to dad?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, children love their parent
Mhm.
unconditionally. Parents need to love their children unconditionally and not just because they are hook, line, and sunk into this culture of anger and fear and hatred and rage.
Yeah, I agree. And
We could talk forever on this.
I know. Well, that's why we're gonna do this again next month. So I'm gonna have you back on because this was really informative. This is what people need to hear. And just because you're getting divorced doesn't mean you have to run into a courtroom. You can just do separate attorneys and write something up, a settlement that you both agree on. You don't have to, your divorce could literally cost you, well, mine was $500 for me, but that was it.
Yep.
It can be done. What should be done and put into a settlement is that no third party, like when someone remarries, that third party cannot insert themselves in between the co-parent relationship if it's going well. Just they can't interfere.
I wish, believe it or not, I have quite a few cases where the parents were doing fine in the divorce
Mm,
until the second spouse came in. Then all hell hit the fan because that parent, that
mhm.
step parent, is an alienator
Oh,
or can
yeah.
never have children of their own.
Hands up, that was me.
Yep. Now I was the step parent in my husband's situation, but I had no need to. I had my own daughter. I didn't have any need to have his kids be my children. They
Uh-huh.
were, but I only saw these kids 6 times in the whole time that I've been with my husband, which is, I don't even know if I saw them 6 times. Might
Mm,
have only been 3. He saw them maybe 6 or 8 times.
mm,
So, we were, my husband's ex started alienating him the day she found out that I was in his life. The minute she found out that we were engaged, that's when she started pouring on the alienation, because she had such low self-worth and self-esteem. She truly believed that I was going to take the kids from her. She
mm.
truly believed that I used Department of Children and Family Services to steal the kids from her. And this is what she told the children. And to this day, these 33 and 35-year-olds still believe this.
Oh,
They have no clue what transpired originally. They do not know that this had nothing to do with that. DCF had nothing to do with that their mother had begun doing this as soon as she found out I was dating them. that she had began to alienate, and that the only reason DCF got involved was like a year later when my husband's not seeing his kids, and then when he goes to drop the kid off, the dog takes a dump on his excuse my language, folks. Dog takes a poop on the ex-wife's foot, and she flicks it into the apartment. And then my husband realizes the odor of urine and poop in the house, and realizes that she may not be caring for the animals, and he get rightfully concerned. But we didn't say anything yet. And then we find out that the children are having serious dental issues.
Oh no!
Because they had teeth rot, and we're like, okay, they had rotted teeth because when they were babies, their mom had put them to sleep with not knowing, with a bottle of juice or milk, and it rotted their teeth. It's called bottle rot.
Mm-hmm.
But she wasn't, apparently there was a problem with that. So as these couple of things came up, then we called DCF and said, can you please just check in? We didn't ask for custody. We're just asking to please do a wellness check to check in on this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what DCF's answer was. Everybody's idea of cleanliness is different. And that it's perfectly normal for children's teeth to rot out of their mouth.
Okay.
Yep. But to this day, the kids still believe we did this report because we were trying to take the kids away from the mother. No, we didn't have any contact with them. We had no way of knowing what was going on beyond after that last incident with the dog poop.
Oh man.
We didn't know. So there was a concern. Plus, we saw that the kids' grades were going up and down like this. Every time my husband would have therapy with the kids' grades would go plummeting, their behavior would go plummeting.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we stopped the therapy, their grades would go back up. Mm-hmm. There were 6 court orders for therapy. And that's why we could actually see the pattern.
What a shame. This is what's going on. And we need to let people know what's going on. And I'm just so glad that I met you and you're coming back on next month.
I will be happy to. Yes.
And I can put your contact information from the last podcast onto this one. Is that all right?
Please do.
Okay. Well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Mary Ann Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Join us again here with Joan Kloth-Zanard in the future and other exciting guests. Thank you so much, Joan.
You're welcome. Bye, folks.